So what I want to talk about today is the Iran war, and specifically how I'm investing around it. Because I think if you're not paying attention to this war and not investing around this war, you're going to lose a lot of money. So let's dive right into this. So let's start with my theory around Iran and what they're trying to get out of this war. Partially because I have a theory around Iran, partially because I can't think about what Trump is thinking about this war because there's really no good reason for him to be in this war.
Carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America.
But I guess I do have a couple thoughts about that. But my thoughts about Iran make a bigger difference because I don't think we can get out of this war without Iran wanting out of this war. And right now, well, they're not going to let us out of this war, I don't believe. So anyways, let's go down this theory. So what's my theory around Iran? Essentially, the theory is very simple. They want to win. You say, of course, they want to win, but you really have to put your mindset in what winning means for Iran and put your mindset in what they've endured through the last 47 years of their regime on what winning actually means. Can they endure more bombs for the next 3, 4, 5 months? Potentially, yes. From their perspective, if they can get what they want to get, then why not endure a little bit more pain? And at the end of the day, a bad economy just affects their residents, and they've shown that they don't really care about their regular citizens too much. And their leadership, they're going to eat well. Let's face it, they're not going to, they might be in hiding, but they're going to eat well. So yeah, they're going to have not the best of the next 3, 4 months. But I don't even believe that we're going to attack them anymore because at the end of the day, if we attack them, they've threatened that they're now going to hit oil and refineries and water desalinations. And if we hit them and they actually implement that, oh no. Well, let's just say we have a bigger problem than we already have. So I think they've set themselves up where they can just wait this thing out. And what does waiting this thing out means? It means that they can shut down the Strait of Hormuz and wait for oil prices to get so bad that the Americans are just screaming for a deal. And yeah, they have asked us for their demands, which, by the way, if you've watched American news, you notice how, they've said that Iran gave us a set of demands, and they've said that they're ridiculous, and they might have said a couple, 1 or 2 things, I think they've actually said that they're asking for 5 to 7 or 7% fees, but they have not actually given the list of their demands. There's a reason why they haven't, but essentially, the media has this information, but they're not actually giving it to us. I actually do have the basis of their demands, which ironically, it's kind of funny. Like the first demand is the hardest, yet the easiest to actually implement. The first one is the U.S. shall not make threats or insults. You would think that should be the easiest, but well, if you know Trump, well, I don't think he can. But since they actually put out those demands, he hasn't done that. So maybe they actually, I don't know if they actually did this, but they might have actually put a clause in it. It's like, you violate any of these right now, we're going to attack oil facilities too. So he has not made a threat or an insult in the last, whenever they put these out. So this must have been 6 or 7 days ago or something like that. So maybe that's actually even part of that. But I'm going to skip the next detail because the next one is a big doozy. I'll leave that more towards the end. The next one was the naval blockade. Okay, that's obvious. Obviously, they're going to put that in there. The next one gets a little more difficult, but it's not that hard. It's lifting the sanctions. That's expected. They're going to ask for that. That's a little hard for us to swallow. I think that would be hard for some people to swallow, but I think that's actually even just a presidential thing that could be signed. So I don't think that's too hard for a president to sign. The next one after that all of a sudden gets really difficult, though. War reparations. We've never given war reparations after a war. And that is not something that Trump could just actually just sign and give war reparations. That would have to go through Congress. And their war reparations, when they originally asked for, talked about it, was $300 billion. But I believe this isn't $300 billion anymore. I believe this is more like $500 billion. That's not going to go through Congress very quickly. And if it's not going through Congress very quickly, guess what? Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed for a very long time because, well, if they're not opening up the Strait of Hormuz until the war reparations are paid, then, well, it's just not going to be open. What's the next one on there? The release of the stolen assets of Iran. We actually did steal assets of theirs back in 1979. And they didn't specify, at least the document that I have, did not specify whether that is inflation adjusted. Either way, that kind of makes sense. That's been in every one of that was in the original MOU, I believe, and that just makes sense. That's not a hard pill to swallow compared to, well, the war reparations. But the last one is the hardest, and it was number 2 on their list, but I left it to the end because, well, it's pretty much impossible for us to actually go through with this, and it's end the war in Lebanon and Palestine and Yemen. That's not something we can do. And the Israelis would have to agree with that, and they're never going to agree with that. So essentially, you can basically say this is not happening, which means the Strait of Hormuz is not opening. Eventually, this oil trade that I have is going to work. It's just time that I have to wait. It's not the fact that it's not. Yeah, they can manipulate the market as all they want. But if with enough time, you can manipulate the market as much as you want. Eventually, it's got to go up because eventually you're just going to run out of oil and there's going to be absolute shortages. And Iran will wait that because they want to win. And by the way, all these, this list is not to open up the Strait of Hormuz and be free. This is to open up the Strait of Hormuz and have the 5 to 7% fees. And if that might not sound like much because you pay sales tax on things and it's 5 to 7% in most states. No, this is a huge tax. All other straits in the world have 300 times less fees than a 5 to 7% fee. Think about what's going through the Strait of Hormuz. Like one of these oil tankers that goes through is carrying $1 billion worth of oil. So before they were saying $2 million per vessel, and $2 million per vessel sound terrible, but $2 million per vessel, this 5% of $1 billion, what's that, $50 million per vessel now? $50 to $70 million per vessel? And that is if they don't, they put it in here that they can actually look to see if you violated any of their terms. I think that's what it was. And then they can multiply that times 3. And they're going to find issues. If they get that much more money, they're going to find issues. So, that's bad. Anyways, let's get back to my theory on how to invest around the war in general. Obviously, this all indicates that oil is a good long-term buy if Iran wants to win the war. And, well, they probably do. Other things I think that we should go over is the oil futures. I'm going to actually go into the web and do some of the searches, or show you some of the searches that I actually look up. I look up oil futures all the time. One of the things I actually look up is, in the last 24 hours, have the Houthis made any attacks? This is important because also it reflects on where are we in the state of accelerating the oil demise, I would call it, of shortages. So actually, from this search, Yemen actually did carry out an attack in the Bab el-Mandab Strait and hit a ship. But every day it's a little bit different. They have hit refineries in Saudi Arabia. They've hit several Saudi Arabian refineries, which is just slowing down the amount of oil they can get out of Saudi Arabia. This is almost just as big of a deal as the Strait of Hormuz in general, because if this continues and they actually wipe out Saudi Arabia's ability to export, who cares if the Strait of Hormuz is open? You got the biggest oil exporter basically shut down because of this war. Terribleness. Anyways, the other searches I search to see if Iran made any attacks, and actually they do sometimes make attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. That's very important to know. Sometimes that means more than lately, because lately basically nothing, no boats have been going to the Strait of Hormuz anyways, because there's a double blockade on it. So it's not that big a deal compared to today. But other weeks, it kind of makes a bigger difference on how I might invest around that. Likewise, I'll say, did the U.S. make any attacks? Lately, the U.S. has stopped making attacks because they're fearful of the Iranians just basically destroying all the oil fields over in the Gulf states. Here's a good search that Gemini has actually really gotten good, because what happens is when you do a Google search these days, it actually goes through Google Gemini. So what I'll ask is something like, if the Strait of Hormuz does not open until November, I asked November because that's when the election season is, what will oil prices most likely be? And it's like, it'll pass me over $100 a barrel. So I don't think Iran's even going to really finish any type of negotiations where they would actually sign anything until November, which means all those agreements, if we actually agreed to them on that day, would then have to start going through Congress. It's my belief that it would take another 6 months to a year to get through Congress and Trump and all that has to be to get signed off from that. But even if it got accelerated, let's say it took another 2 months. Instead of saying until November, until next year, what would it be? And then you got to expect oil prices going to almost $130 a barrel. And that is optimistic, if you ask me, that we actually have the strait open by early next year, which means this oil trade is just so good. Anyways, moving on, let's move off of oil. Other places where I like to get my news is actually, even though I don't care about one political side over the other's political side, I do think you have to get information from both political sides to understand a little bit of difference and lessen your bias around it. But also, Fox News. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're apolitical. Get your news from Fox News, not because you care about what Fox News is saying. It's because you care what Trump is listening to. And Trump listens to it, and you can get your Fox News for a few things. There's 3 things that you get from it. One, it's what Trump is listening to, so you can kind of get into his mindset. 2 is what you ignore from it. Sometimes they just do rah-rah, oh, Trump is lovely, I love Trump, I love Trump. I ignore that because it doesn't help me with investing at all. It's just like rah-rah Trump. I don't care about whether you love Trump, you hate Trump. I'm not there for loving or hating Trump. I didn't vote for either Republican or Democrat last time. I voted third party just because I didn't like either party, to be honest. I was like, okay, third party. But the third thing you can get from it is sometimes the White House, I say the White House, but the government likes to actually give. And right now, because they're really good in cahoots with Fox, give them, basically tells them what their next strategic plan is. And so what they'll do is, like, if they're going to attack another country, what they'll do is say, hey, listen, we want you to run a smear campaign where essentially you'll go in and say, hey, listen, tell people that Iran is hurting little children or beating women or like murdering or executing random people or something to that extent. If you start hearing that, that gives you an indication that they want that smear campaign out so it feels good when we attack them. The reason why they do that is because when we attack them, they've already dehumanized the people that we have attacked. They don't want to say, oh, and there's many good people over there, and why would you attack good people? No, you smear campaign the people you're about to bomb. So when you see that, you can kind of go, oh, I got a feeling that The next thing we're going to do is actually attack them. And anyways, moving on to the next thing. This is back to the oil. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is essentially the lowest it's ever been, and it's about to run out. So we will not have that to draw on. It's really actually we're not getting that much from it, to be honest. This is, as much as stopping will hurt a lot, and it will, we're compared to the amount that the Gulf was actually giving us, it's only got 20 million barrels of oil left. The Gulf used to give us 20 million barrels a day. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve running out is a big deal. Oh, it says 298, but at the end of the day, there's only 20 million barrels that we can draw from it until we hit the legal limits, essentially. Oh, and the other thing with Fox, you go onto their website and you can also see smear campaigns from there where you all of a sudden, there's no reason for the public to know that Iran was going to potentially assassinate Trump. Why would you actually get that out? Basically, they hide all sorts of information. You get that out because it's a smear campaign. You want the people to feel really good about hating Iran. So they just did that. It's not that we're necessarily going to attack, but it means that we're not in the mindset of signing an agreement right now. We're in the mindset of still hating these people and not signing. So I think we're not signing an agreement anytime soon. Let's put it that way. One more place that I love getting my news is independent places on the web. Specifically, this guy named Mario Nawfal, I think his name is. Anyways, he interviews amazing people. Some of these people are ex-CIA. I think this dude here, he's ex-CIA. They've got people that are still talking to Trump on a daily basis. So you kind of get little nuggets on what they've said to Trump and what their conversations are like. So when you hear those details, you're like, oh, so that's what's the inside ear on who's talking to Trump. But then you also get some great people on where are the oil reserves? What's some PhD that understands these oil reserves in a very different way? What are they thinking about it? And just a lot of good information coming from his site. And then I always try to get the opposite perspective just because I'm not going to fill myself with all Fox News in my brain. I have to go with CNN. I think that's a good opposite of Fox News right now. I think it used to be middle of the road until Trump came along, and then all of a sudden it became pretty much liberal site. Probably not as liberal as NBC, but anyways, I'll do NBC too sometimes. But anyways, those are the places where I get my news. That's, I guess, pretty much everything I really wanted to get into. But just make sure you're paying attention to a lot of the things outside of the mainstream media, and you're not just filling yourself up on just Fox News, or just CNN, or just one source of data. Get a diverse amount of opinions, and then try to come up with a thesis on how to invest around that. And essentially that's how I'm investing. And as always, good luck. Bye-bye.